My name is Rafael, you're watching Rock and Roll Garage, and today I'm going to tell you why the late legendary Lemmy Kilmister was not a big fan of The Clash. But first, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Well, he was a huge fan of punk rock music, especially the Ramones, and he also liked some of the songs of the Sex Pistols, a lot of their sound. The Motörhead even covered the God Save the Queen song, and he wrote a song for the Ramones. Ramones was his favorite punk rock group. And when you think about punk rock music, you're usually gonna remember the Ramones, Sex Pistols, and the Clash as some of the biggest ones. And Lemmy was not a fan of the Clash. And why he wasn't a fan of them? He didn't like their sound, and he explained that in an interview, for example, with Spin magazine in 2009, and he said, "I never liked the Clash. They sounded like old music, dressed up as punk. The Ramones were geniuses, though. Joe especially had a nose for rock and roll, and we were friends, although we weren't close when he died. I hate to see people on the way out. I prefer to remember him as he was." And then in an interview with Louder War in 2011, the Motörhead leader described their music as pretend politics. He said, "I never had the time for the Clash and their pretend politics, but the Damned and the Ramones were great rock and roll bands." Well, Lemmy, besides being an incredible musician, I think he's a very underrated lyricist, especially, and songwriter. He was also quite sincere, so he always gave his real opinion on other bands and artists, and if he didn't like them, he would say, and he would have no problem in saying that. And The Clash was one of the most influential punk rock groups from that era and of all time. They were formed in 1976, 1 year after Motörhead. Motörhead was formed in 1975. And they were active until 1986, and their classic lineup had Joe Strummer, one of the main songwriters, the main songwriter after Mick Jones left. He was also the guitarist and the vocalist. You had Mick Jones on guitar, you had Paul Sinomon on bass, and Topper Headon on drums. That was the classic lineup of the band, which released most of their most classic albums, their most successful albums. And it's really interesting that Lemmy was not a big fan of them. And it's interesting because, and Motörhead's a very interesting band as well, because they were one of the few bands which there was a rivalry between the metalheads and the punks back in the late 70s especially, and they usually didn't like each other, and the bands and artists from those genres didn't like each other either. But Motörhead appeared as a group that was heavy, like heavy metal bands, but it was also fast, like punk rock. And they were a mix of it. And they were one of the few bands that both punks and metalheads were big fans of. And they would go to their concerts and be there together. And as I said, Lemmy was a huge punk rock fan, and we already did a video about this. I showed which were some of his favorite punk rock groups of all time. As I said, the Damned, the Ramones, for example, are some of them. And if you want to watch this video, you can go to the description and visit this video, watch it. And if you want to read more, please go to the description also and visit the article I wrote about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Tell me if you like The Clash or not. I particularly love them. I think The Clash is one of the greatest punk rock bands of all time, but I understand what was Lemmy's point of view of it. You know, they were playing old rock and roll. You know, the Ramones was kind of doing the same thing. But obviously the Ramones were sound was a little bit more close to what punk really was about, I think. But it's always really interesting to see what was Lemmy's opinion about things, because he was a fantastic musician and songwriter. And that's it. Thank you for watching. Like the video, leave your comment, and subscribe. See you later.